The listing went live at 2:11 a.m., and Daniel found it because sleep had stopped visiting him weeks ago. He lay in the dark scrolling through homes in upstate New York, half distracted, until the photo of the Victorian stopped his thumb mid-swipe. A 3-story house with a slate roof and wraparound porch priced so far below market value it looked like a mistake. Yet it wasn't, and when he zoomed in, he saw there were only 3 photos attached to the listing. The exterior taken at dusk with long shadows stretching across an overgrown lawn and no neighboring houses visible, just trees pressing in at the edges. The second of a grand staircase with dark wood banisters and a chandelier suspended above like frozen rain, and the third, a narrow hallway ending at a white basement door slightly ajar, beyond which was not shadow exactly, but a flat, consuming blackness that swallowed light without reflection. And he felt an involuntary chill before nudging Mara awake to show her, watching her skepticism turn into sharp interest as she whispered that it had to be a scam, that no house that size 2 hours north of New York City could be listed that low without something deeply wrong. Yet the description was sparse and official. Historic property, recently vacated, sold as is. And that phrase, recently vacated, lingered with him longer than it should have, because it implied departure without explanation. So by Saturday, they were driving up a highway that grew emptier by the mile until the town appeared like a photograph left too long in the sun. Storefronts faded, a diner with a flickering open sign, a gas station that looked permanently exhausted. And when they turned onto Maple Hollow Road, the trees thickened and the sky seemed narrower, and then the house revealed itself at the end of a gravel drive, larger than in the photos, pale blue siding washed nearly gray, tall windows reflecting nothing but the sky, the porch sagging slightly at one corner as if tired of holding itself upright. And Daniel felt the oddest sensation that the house was not abandoned but waiting, which made him straighten his shoulders as the realtor, a woman named Carol who avoided eye contact just enough to be noticeable, unlocked the front door and ushered them inside where the air smelled faintly of dust and something metallic beneath it. And immediately Daniel noticed the staircase was positioned opposite of where it had appeared in the listing photo, curving to the right instead of the left. And he assumed at first that he had misremembered until Mara whispered that she thought so too, yet neither of them wanted to sound paranoid in front of Carol, who was already talking too quickly about crown molding and original hardwood floors, leading them through rooms that felt subtly misaligned, as if the house had been built from a blueprint that shifted mid-construction, windows appearing on walls that should have faced the driveway, yet instead revealed dense woods, light entering from angles that didn't match the exterior orientation. And Daniel found himself glancing at his phone to recheck the listing photos, only to feel a cold trickle along his spine when he realized the interior shot of the staircase now matched what he was seeing in person, railing curving right, not left, as though the image had updated itself to correct his memory. And he said nothing because the rational explanation was that he had been tired at 2:11 a.m., that he had simply flipped the image in his mind. And when they reached the hallway with the basement door, he noticed the door was now fully closed, paint chipped near the handle, and Carol hesitated before touching the knob, saying the basement wasn't staged and had some minor moisture issues, but nothing structural. And Daniel watched her open it slowly to reveal steep wooden steps descending into dimness, this time not absolute black, but a grayish shadow lit faintly by a single bulb hanging at the bottom. And he felt relief at the ordinariness of it even as Mara squeezed his hand a little too tightly. And they made an offer that evening because logic outweighed unease and the price was too good to ignore. And within 3 weeks they were moving in with borrowed furniture and cautious optimism, telling friends they had found a historic gem, telling themselves the strange first impression had been nerves. Yet the first night in the house brought a quiet so complete it felt engineered. No distant traffic, no insects, no wind against the siding. And Daniel lay awake again listening to the silence until he heard what sounded like a soft thud from somewhere below. Not loud enough to be dramatic, but deliberate enough to be intentional. And he sat up, heart thudding, convincing himself it was old pipes or settling beams. And in the morning he opened the Zillow app out of habit, only to see that the listing was still active despite the sale being finalized. and confusion sharpened into unease when he noticed a fourth photo had been added, uploaded overnight, showing the living room with their couch positioned exactly where it now stood, a coffee mug on the table that matched the one Mara had unpacked yesterday, and Daniel's reflection faintly visible in the darkened television screen, as if the photo had been taken from inside the room while he wasn't looking. And he scrolled frantically, but the timestamp read 3:03 a.m., a time he distinctly remembered being awake in bed staring at the ceiling. And when Mara came into the room, he turned the phone to her and watched the color drain from her face, because neither of them had taken that picture, and there was no angle inside the house from which it could have been captured without someone physically standing there. And as they stood in the quiet morning light trying to force a reasonable explanation into place, the app refreshed again, and a fifth photo appeared, this one taken from the hallway outside their bedroom, angled toward the slightly open door. And Daniel felt the unmistakable, suffocating awareness that whatever had recently vacated the house had not left at all, but had simply moved deeper inside it, waiting for new occupants to arrive. Daniel didn't speak for a long time after the fifth photo appeared, because saying anything out loud would make it real in a way screenshots could not, and Mara stood beside him staring at the image of their half-open bedroom door taken from the hallway, the angle slightly tilted as if the photographer had been standing very still but not entirely steady, and what unsettled him most was not just that the photo existed, but that he recognized the exact sliver of darkness inside the room beyond the door, because he had woken at 3:03 a.m. with the strange sensation of being watched, and had almost gotten up to close that door before deciding he was being ridiculous, and now his hesitation felt like participation. He refreshed the page again, hoping it would disappear, hoping it was some delayed database glitch, but instead a sixth image began loading pixel by pixel, revealing the hallway from the opposite direction, taken from inside their bedroom looking out, and Daniel felt the air leave his lungs, because that meant whoever or whatever had taken the previous photo had not remained in the hall, but had crossed the threshold into the room where they had been sleeping. And Mara whispered that they needed to call the police, yet even as she said it, her voice carried doubt, because how do you explain that a real estate app is documenting your interior in real time without sounding unwell? And Daniel forced himself to think methodically, checking the windows, checking the locks, inspecting the attic hatch and the basement door, half expecting to find footprints or displaced dust that would confirm a human presence. But the house appeared undisturbed in that infuriatingly pristine way that suggests nothing is wrong while everything is wrong. And when he opened the basement door, the metallic smell seemed stronger, heavier, and the single bulb at the bottom of the steps flickered once as if reacting to his gaze, and he descended slowly, each step creaking beneath his weight, noticing that the basement felt larger than it had during the walkthrough, the walls stretching slightly farther back, the concrete floor colder underfoot, and along the far wall he saw something he was certain had not been there before, a narrow wooden door flush with the foundation, painted the same gray as the concrete, so that it nearly vanished unless you were looking directly at it. And as he approached it, he felt an inexplicable resistance in his chest, like static building under his skin, and he reached for the handle only to hear Mara call sharply from upstairs, her voice edged with panic, and he rushed back up to find her holding his phone out at arm's length as if it might burn her, because the listing had updated again, and this time the photo was of the basement stairs, taken from below looking up, capturing the exact moment Daniel had turned his head toward the sound of her voice, his expression frozen in the frame with dawning recognition, and the timestamp read 3:17 p.m., which was impossible because it was currently 3:16. And as they watched the minute change on the kitchen clock, the app refreshed once more, and the timestamp corrected itself to 3:18, the image unchanged except for Daniel's face now angled slightly differently, as though the photographer had taken multiple shots and chosen the most recent one, and the sense of being observed shifted into something more precise, more deliberate, because this was no random haunting or residual echo, but an active documentation of their movements, a cataloging, and Daniel's mind grasped for explanations rooted in technology rather than the supernatural, hidden cameras installed by a previous owner, a hacker exploiting some obscure vulnerability, but none of that accounted for the way the interior had subtly rearranged itself since move-in, the staircase that had changed direction between viewing and purchase, the windows that now faced trees where there should have been road. And he pulled up the original screenshot he had taken the night he found the listing, scrolling back through his gallery until he located it. And there, in the third photo, was the basement door slightly open with absolute black beyond it. No visible bulb, no stairs, just void. And he compared it to the current listing where the same door appeared closed and mundane, and a thought surfaced slowly and unwillingly. What if the photos were not documenting the house as it was, but the house as it would be, or worse, the house as it wanted to be seen? And Mara insisted they leave immediately, pack a bag, drive back to the city, call the realtor, call anyone. But as she reached for her keys, Daniel noticed through the front window that the gravel driveway seemed longer than before, stretching farther into the trees, and beyond it he could not see the road at all, only dense forest pressing closer than it had that morning. And when he opened the Zillow app yet again, compelled despite himself, he saw that the listing description had changed, the previous bland wording replaced by a single sentence, "Recently vacated, ready for new occupants," and beneath it the price had dropped to 0, listed as "contact for access," and the photo count had increased to 12, each thumbnail a small square of their own house from angles neither of them had stood in, the kitchen from inside the pantry, the living room from behind the couch, the porch from the yard at dusk, even though it was still daylight outside. And one image in particular froze his thoughts completely. The narrow wooden door in the basement foundation standing open, revealing not a small storage space, but a corridor extending into darkness, the walls lined with framed photographs identical in size and shape to the listing images. And at the far end of the corridor stood 2 figures facing the camera, their forms slightly blurred but unmistakable in outline, a man and a woman positioned shoulder to shoulder. And Daniel realized with slow, sick certainty that the house was not being photographed by an intruder, but by itself, that it was curating its own listing, advertising availability, updating in real time as they explored it. And the phrase "recently vacated" did not refer to the previous owners moving out, but to something else stepping aside temporarily to allow new subjects into the frame. And as this understanding settled over him, the lights flickered once throughout the house, a synchronized dimming and brightening that felt almost like a blink, and his phone vibrated in his hand as a notification appeared. "Price reduced. Schedule a tour today," followed by a newly uploaded image that was still processing, loading line by line until it resolved into a photograph of the 2 of them standing in the living room staring at their phone, captured from the perspective of the staircase. And what made Mara begin to cry softly was not just that the image existed, but that in the photo their reflections in the dark television screen were not mirroring their movements, but were instead turned toward the hallway, as if watching someone approach from behind.